Hey guys, this is EJ Holland with the Wolverine.com, and we are offering a new special promotion. Sign up right now and get full access to the Wolverine.com's insider information for just $10 until next football season. So that's basically an entire year for just $10. Sign up right now. All right, guys, we're back with another episode of the Road Report. I was in the state of Virginia this week. I was also supposed to go to Philadelphia, but ran into some travel issues, which is another story for another day. Let's focus in on the two targets I saw here in Virginia, starting off with 2023 three-star defensive lineman Rodney Lora out of Woodbury Forest. So Laura is one of the most interesting prospects on the Michigan board. This is a guy that the Wolverines offered in the spring, and then they kind of cooled on him and made other guys priorities. Laura ended up committing to Virginia. But fast forward to now, and we're about 2 months away from signing day, and things have changed dramatically. Michigan only has one defensive line commit in Brooks Barr, so they're looking for another one. And Laura recently backed out of his verbal pledge to Virginia. So Michigan has circled back around. Mike Elston, Michigan's defensive line coach, has been evaluating senior film. Both parties have had positive conversations over the last week and a half, and Michigan is looking to get him on campus for an official visit. Now let's talk about his recruitment before we talk about Laura as a player and what I saw on Friday afternoon. In terms of his recruitment right now, I think this is Michigan's recruitment to lose if they push. So, again, Michigan needs a defensive lineman. They've circled back to Laura, but there's still some question marks. He only played 3 games last year. So that's why Elston has been heavily evaluating senior film. Now, there have been some question marks, not just from Michigan, but from some other schools as well, about Laura's limited athleticism. He's also not the biggest guy at right at 6'3", 260 pounds. He does have the frame to add 20 to 25 pounds. The height's not, super ideal. I actually think he's closer to 6'2" or 6'2 and a half. But again, we'll talk a little bit more about him as a player here in a couple minutes. But in terms of his recruitment, if Michigan wants Laura, I think he ends up at Michigan. There really isn't another school that I'm concerned about right now that is really in the mix with Laura. You've had schools like Syracuse and Duke make a push. You've had Tennessee show some interest, but I think Michigan is far and away the team to beat, again, if they do make an all-out effort. If Michigan says, hey, Laura is a guy we want to pair with Barr, then, again, I think Michigan's the team to beat. But I do think Michigan wants to continue to evaluate him. The only school that would really concern me is Penn State. But Penn State had him on campus for an unofficial visit last weekend and decided not to offer. So, right now it doesn't look like Penn State's going to jump in the mix. That means the door is wide open for Michigan to win this recruitment. If they do decide to bring him in for an official visit, which right now it looks like, it could very well happen, then, yeah, he's a guy that I could see at Michigan all the way. As a player, so should Michigan, make an all-out push, there's 2 months to go before signing day. You have to start making some moves here. But as we saw last cycle, Michigan was capable of finding some high-level guys. Even up front, you had Derek Moore, who was a late flip. You had Mason Graham, who was a late riser. So there is still some wiggle room to find guys that are at a higher level than Laura. Right now, the concerns that I have with Laura are the same concerns that, Michigan and Penn State have, which is, limited athleticism, but also the height, I guess, concerns me a little bit. Just the size overall. It does look like he has the frame to add 20 to 25 pounds, but he's not super, explosive. He's not super athletic. He's a guy that just has a high motor, and he brings his lunch pail to work. He actually reminds me a little bit of a signee from a couple cycles ago, Dominic Jadis, in the sense that Jadis was a guy that added some weight towards the end of his senior year, and was also limited athletically and just didn't really stand out, but he just had a really high motor and just was productive, right? And I think Laura's kind of the same way. Nothing really pops out about him, but he has a high motor and he's productive, and he could potentially be a 3, could potentially, be a guy that, has his hand in the dirt, but also can stand up at times. And that's what I saw from him at Woodbury Forest on Friday afternoon. He's a guy that played more of a 4-3 defensive tackle role. So he was, kind of in a 4-eye, I guess, and in a 3 sometimes. And he was at a 5'5" and out at a 7. So he played multiple roles along the defensive line. He actually looked pretty decent as a pass rusher. He had a couple of tackles for loss. Again, he's a high motor kid, but the height and the need to add weight concerns me a bit. But not only just adding weight. I mean, if you end up at Michigan, Ben Herbert's going to get your body right? So, that kind of limits my concern. But also adding the strength and the power is something else that needs to be done at the next level. But I'm not sure how much athleticism he's really going to showcase at the next level. So I think he's a fringe guy. I think, Michigan can continue to evaluate him. And looking at his recruitment, like I said, it's not like these other major P5 schools are jumping in as well. If you're facing off against Duke or Syracuse, I mean, who cares? You can afford to wait, right? So I think this is a kid that they're going to continue to evaluate and keep warm. And, if we're sitting here, I'm recording this on October 8th. If we're sitting here on November 8th and we're in the same situation and no other guys have popped up, then I think, it's time to bring Laura in for an OV. But right now he's a guy that, again, is interesting given the situation, given the fact that Michigan has one defensive line commit, they want another, the familiarity from Michigan having offered in the spring, the recent conversation. So, again, this is a guy that Michigan can get if they want, but I'm just not sure Michigan's ready to press, and I completely understand why. And that's not saying Laura's a bad player. Like I said, I think he can be a decent role player. He's just a guy you can afford to wait, and you can play the game a little bit, see who else pops up. You have teams struggling. You're going to have coaches get fired. You are going to have the same opportunity if you continue to win on the field that you did last cycle. So no need to rush and press for a guy like Laura. Just keep doing what you're doing, right? So next guy I saw, so I drove from Richmond, Virginia, back down to the 757, got to Virginia Beach in time for the second half of the Salem First Colonial game. I always hate to miss, half of a game, but Laura had a 4 p.m. kickoff, and, it kind of presented the opportunity to catch a back half of a game. So obviously I took it. As you guys know, I'm, live and breathe football. Anytime I can see a game, I can, which is why I'm so disappointed I didn't get to go to Philadelphia this weekend. Just very sad outcomes with Hertz Rental. Give them 1 star. But anyway, Salem High School here in Virginia Beach is home to one of the premier recruits in the country in top 100 2025 edge rusher Ari Watford. So again, I only got to see half of a game of Watford, but from the time I stepped on the field right after the halftime show, I mean, he was extremely impressive. I mean, you're talking about a kid physically who's a 2025, which means he's a sophomore right now. You can't find a more impressive looking athlete for a guy so young at that position. He's right at about 6'4.5", 6'5", 225 pounds. I mean, he is big for just being a sophomore, and he has the room to add some weight. I mean, he could be in the same mold as an Eno Etta by the time he's a senior. Now, Watford is extremely athletic. He has great length. I think he's going to be a better prospect than Eno Etta, who is one of Michigan's top-rated commits this cycle. In fact, he's already rated as the number 16 overall prospect in the country per the On3 consensus. So he is going to be a guy recruited by everybody. Now, I think Michigan did a great job of getting on Watford early. And it was actually a guy that doesn't get a lot of love. So, Mike Hart's the area recruiter in Virginia, but isn't super active out here. The guy that is getting Michigan more active in this part of the country is actually new director of recruiting operations, Albert Karshnia. So Karshnia developed some relationships with those around Watford in the offseason and put an offer on the table. So Watford told me he's really intrigued by Michigan. He'd like to make a visit at some point in the near future. He loves the fact that Michigan produced 2 high-level edge rushers last year that went high in the NFL draft, in Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo. Obviously, contact between kids and coaches is limited per NCAA rules, but he does want to talk a lot more to the coaching staff. But I think Michigan's an early player here. There are some other major programs obviously involved early: Georgia, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Penn State, Ole Miss, etc. I mean, I think Watford's going to have his pick of the litter 2 years from now. But I think you have to give some kudos to Karshnia for developing relationships in this part of the country, getting in early on a guy like Watford, who is quickly ascending as, again, one of the best overall prospects in the country in 2025. And I do think he is an elite pass rusher. I do think he's an edge guy all the way. I don't think this is a guy that's going to outgrow the position. I mentioned how big he is already, but I don't think he's going to outgrow the position. On3 actually only lists him at 215, but he looks about 5-10 pounds heavier than that. But worst case, he becomes an Eno Etta type edge. But I think, again, he's super long, he's super athletic, he's fast off the edge. There's some things he can still work on just, over the next couple of years, just playing the run, adding more hip flexibility, some little things that I noticed. But this guy checks the boxes for me. I mean, I think he's going to be in contention to be a 5-star prospect 2 years from now. So that's my time, guys. Appreciate you for joining me on this week's Road Report. As always, subscribe to the Wolverine.com. Like I said at the top of the show, we are running a new promotion, $10 until next football season. Appreciate it.